Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books, where we find out what to do and what not to do in this material world. Before we do, we're going to read the prayers offered to the Srimad-Bhagavatam. I'm going to give you a little background, those of you who are just coming new. We're reading from the Srimad-Bhagavatam. Sriman means beautiful or heavy. And Bhagavatam means pertaining to the Bhagavan, or the Supreme Being, the beautiful Supreme Being. This literature is eternal, but it was brought into manifestation into this age we're living in now, about 5,000 years ago, by Vyasadeva, who was the author. And it is a literary incarnation of Krishna. Literary incarnation means it's Krishna in sound. Because in the spiritual world, the sound and the form are the same, absolute. Here, if we're thirsty and we chant water, 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 we just get more thirsty. We don't quench our thirst by chanting the word water, water, because there's a difference between the sound, water, and the substance, water. And this material world is a reflection of the spiritual world, in which all the forms are the reality. And this is a reflection, just as I was saying to Jaina this afternoon. When you look in your at yourself in the mirror, you see a form that looks like you, but it's a reflection. If you turn out the lights, you can't see it anymore, because it's just light reflecting off your form into the mirror. And when you stand away from the mirror, then it disappears. This is the nature of reflection. It's temporary. It looks like you, but it's not you. Or it looks like something, but it's not the something. So this whole material world, this is a little hard to get at the very beginning, but this whole material world is the reflection of God and the spiritual world. So there in the spiritual world, the sound, water, and water are the same. And the form of God and the sound of God are the same. So this Srimad-Bhagavatam is the literary incarnation of God brought into the material world after Krishna left this world. From time to time, God comes personally, or comes in as a representative, son, prophet, representative, saint. But sometimes, like not very often, but sometimes he comes himself in his original form and gives shelter to everyone. And when he leaves, then the shelter goes to the Srimad-Bhagavatam, which we're about to read right now. So having said that, we're going to hear how one of the great saints in our line glorifies the Srimad-Bhagavatam. We'll chant the Sanskrit and then the English. Okay? Okay? All right. The Srimad-Bhagavata Mahima Stotram by Sanatan Goswami. Sarva Shastrabdipi Yusha Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnaja Sarva Lokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabho Kalidwan Noditaditya Shri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Srimad Bhagavatam, You are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshakshadaya Te Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Sri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin Madguru Man Mahadana Man Nishtadaka Madbhagya Mad Ananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Sadhu Sadhuta Dayin Atini Chochata Kada Hanamunchakada Chinmam Premna Rit Kantayospuda. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart, in my voice, with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 So here we are, the 25th chapter of the 4th canto out of 12 cantos of Srimad-Bhagavatam. And we're starting with verse 54. So we're in the middle of this discussion. Maybe a little bit difficult for you newcomers to follow. But let me explain what's happening here. Narada Muni is a great saintly teacher. And he's explaining the material world and material existence and material forms by the form of allegory. He's telling an allegorical story, and he's telling the story to a king who is too attached to material sense gratification and material life. And he's trying to shake him loose so that he'll wake up and realize that the material world is not what it's cracked up to be. So it's a little intense, but open your minds, open your hearts. Okay? Text 54. Now the city that it's talking about is actually the body of the king. Of the many inhabitants of this city, there are two persons named Nirvak and Peshashkrit. Haribol. Although King Puranjana was the ruler of citizens who possessed eyes, he unfortunately used to associate with these blind men. Accompanied by them, he used to go here and there and perform various activities. This is the conditioned soul in the material body. Purport. This is a reference to the arms and legs of the living entity. The two legs do not speak, and they are blind. If a person simply trusts his legs to take him walking, he is likely to fall into a hole or bump into something. Thus, led by the blind legs, one's life may be placed in jeopardy. Of the senses that are working, the hands and legs are very important, but they have no eyes to see. This means that in the hands and legs, there are no holes. In the head, there are many holes, 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. But lower down in the arms and legs, there are no holes. Consequently, the arms and legs have been described as anda, blind. Although the living entity has many holes in his body, he nonetheless has to work with his hands and arms. Although the living entity is the master of many other senses, when he has to go somewhere, do something, or touch something, he has to use his blind legs and hands. 55. Sometimes he used to go to his private home with one of his chief servants, the mind, whose name was Vishuchini. At that time, illusion, satisfaction, and happiness used to be produced from his wife and children. Purport. According to the Vedic conclusion, oneself is situated within the heart. As stated in Vedic language, Hridayam Atma Pratishtita. The self is situated within the heart. In the material condition, however, the spirit soul is covered by the material qualities, namely goodness, passion, and ignorance, and darkness. And within the heart, these three qualities react. For instance, when one is in goodness, he feels happiness. And when one is in passion, he feels satisfaction through material enjoyment. And when one is in darkness, he feels bewilderment. All these activities of the mind, all these activities are of the mind, and they function on the platform of thinking, feeling, and willing. When the living entity is encircled by wife, children, and home, he acts on the mental plane. Sometimes he is very happy. Sometimes he is very much satisfied. Sometimes he is not satisfied. And sometimes he is bewildered. Bewilderment is called moha. So take this chair and move it back towards there. Move it back. Move it back. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Move this chair over as close as far as you can go. Move this chair over. Uncle John, come sit in this chair. The right thing. You always do the right thing. Yeah, you're gonna. You're a big guy. You need a little bit. You need a little bit more room. That's what I'm thinking. All these activities are of the mind, and they function on the platform of thinking, feeling, and willing. When the living entity is encircled by wife, children, and home, he acts on the mental plane. Sometimes he is very happy. Sometimes he is very much satisfied. Sometimes he is not satisfied. And sometimes he is bewildered. Bewilderment is called moha, illusion. Illusioned by society, friendship, and love, the living entity thinks that his so-called society, friendship, and love, nationality, community, etc., will give him protection. He does not know that after death, he will be thrown into the hands of a very strong material that will force a nature, very strong material nature, that will force him to accept a certain type of body according to his present work. This body may not even be a human body. Thus, the living entity's feeling of security in this life, in the midst of society, wife, and friendship, is nothing but illusion. All living entities, encaged in various material bodies, are illusioned at the present by the present activities of material enjoyment. They forget their real business, which is to go back home, back to Godhead. Everyone who is not in Krishna consciousness must be considered to be an illusion. One's so-called feelings of happiness and satisfaction resulting from material things are also illusions. Factually, just a second. Factually, neither society, friendship, love, nor anything else can save one from the onslaught of the external energy, which is symptomized by birth, death, old age, and disease. To get even one living entity out of the illusory condition is very difficult. Therefore, Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 7:14, Daivi yesha gunamayi mama maya duratjaya Mameva ye prapadyante mayametam tadantite. This divine energy of mind, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome, but those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. Therefore, unless one surrenders completely at the lotus feet of Krishna, he cannot get out of the entanglement of the three modes of material nature. Text 56. Being thus entangled in different times of mental concoction and engaged in fruitive activities, King Puranjana became completely under the control of material intelligence and was thus cheated. Indeed, he used to fulfill all the desires of his wife, the queen, which is the intelligence. Purport. When a living entity is in such bewilderment that he is under the control of his wife or material intelligence, he has to satisfy the intelligence of his so-called wife and act exactly according to her dictates. Various shastras advise that for material convenience, one should keep his wife always satisfied by giving her ornaments and by following her instructions. In this way, there will be no trouble in family life. Therefore, for one's own social benefit, one is advised to keep his wife satisfied. In this way, when one becomes the servant of his wife, he must act according to the desires of his wife. Thus one becomes more and more entangled. In Bengal it is said that if one becomes an obedient servant of his wife, in most family life becomes, he loses all reputation. In Bengal it is said that if one becomes an obedient servant of his wife, he loses all reputation. However, the difficulty is that unless one becomes a most obedient servant of his wife, family life becomes disturbed. In the Western countries, this disturbance gives rise to the divorce law, and in Eastern countries like India, there is separation. Now, this disturbance is confirmed by the new introduction of the divorce law in India. Within the heart, the mind is acting, thinking, feeling, and willing, and falling under the control of one's wife is the same as falling under the control of material intelligence. Thus one begets children by his wife and becomes entangled in so many activities under the control of mental concoctions. Hare Krishna.
I forgot her.
What's your name? Michelle. Nice to meet you. Welcome home. We're reading a part of a revealed scripture that is an allegory, an allegorical story describing material existence in kind of like the naked form of material existence, what it actually is, what it actually is doing to us. Even if we can't see it, it gives us, opens our eyes, it helps us see it. Text 57 and 56 through 61. When the queen drank liquor, King Puranjana also engaged in drinking. When the queen dined, he used to dine with her. And when she chewed, King Puranjana used to chew along with her. When the queen sang, he also sang. Similarly, when the queen cried, he also cried. And when the queen laughed, he also laughed. When the queen talked loosely, he also talked loosely. And when the queen walked, the king walked behind her. When the queen would stand still, the king would also stand still. And when the queen would lie down in bed, he would also follow and lie down with her. When the queen sat, he would also sit. And when the queen heard something, he would follow her to hear the same thing. When the queen saw something, the king would also look at it. And when the queen smelled something, the king would follow her to smell the same thing. When the queen touched something, the king would also touch it. And when the dear queen was lamenting, the poor king also had to follow her in lamentation. In the same way, when the queen felt enjoyment, he also enjoyed. And when the queen was satisfied, the king also felt satisfaction. Purport. The mind is the place where the self is situated. And the mind is conducted by the intelligence. The living entity situated within the heart follows the intelligence. The intelligence is herein depicted as the queen, and the soul, under mental control, follows the material intelligence, just as the king follows his wife. The conclusion is that material intelligence is the cause of bondage for the living entity. The point is that one has to take to spiritual intelligence to come out of this entanglement. In the life of Maharaj Ambarish, we find that the great Maharaj first engaged his mind on the lotus feet of Krishna. In this way his intelligence became purified. Maharaj Ambarish also used his other senses in the service of the Lord. He engaged his eyes in seeing the deity in the temple, nicely decorated with flowers. He engaged his sense of smell by smelling the flowers. And he engaged his legs by walking to the temple. His hands were engaged in cleansing the temple, and his ears were engaged in hearing about Krishna. His tongue was engaged in two ways, in speaking about Krishna and in tasting prasad offered to the deity. Materialistic persons who are under the full control of material intelligence cannot perform all these activities. Thus, consciously or unconsciously, they become entangled by the dictations of material intelligence. This fact is summarized in the following verse, 62. In this way, King Puranjana was captivated by his nice wife and was thus cheated. Indeed, he became cheated in his whole existence in the material world. Even against the poor, foolish king's desire, he remained under the control of his wife, just like a pet animal that dances according to the order of its master. Purport. The word vipralabdha is very significant in this verse. Vi means specifically, and pralabdha means obtained. Just to satisfy his desires, the king got the queen, and thus he became cheated by material existence. Although he was not willing to do so, he remained a pet animal under the control of material intelligence, just as a pet monkey dances according to the desires of its master. The king danced according to the desires of the queen. In Srimad-Bhagavatam 5.5.2 it is said, Mahat sevam dvaram ahur vimukte. If one associates with a saintly person, a devotee, one's path of liberation becomes clear. But if one associates with a woman or with a person who is too much addicted to a woman, his path of bondage becomes completely clear. On the whole, for spiritual advancement, one must give up the company of women. This is what is meant by the order of sannyas, the renounced order. Before taking sannyas, or completely renouncing the material world, one has to practice avoiding illicit sex. Sex life, licit or illicit, is practically the same, but through illicit sex, one becomes more and more captivated. By regulating one's sex life, there is a chance that one may eventually be able to renounce sex or renounce the association of women. If this can be done, advancement in spiritual life comes very easily. How one becomes captivated by the association of one's dear wife, and one should hear, I got women in this room who've never been here before. The same goes for the man being captivated by the woman and the woman being captivated by the man. Same goes. Both sides. How one becomes captivated by the association of one's dear wife is explained in this chapter by Narada Muni. Attraction for one's wife means attraction for the material qualities. One who is attracted by the material quality of darkness is in the lowest stage of life, whereas one who is attracted by the material quality of goodness is in a better position. Sometimes we see that when a person is on the platform of material goodness, he is attracted more or less by the cultivation of knowledge. This is, of course, a better position, for knowledge gives one the preference to accept devotional service. Unless one comes to the platform of knowledge, the Brahmabhuta stage, one cannot advance in devotional service. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 18:54, Brahmabhuta prasanatma nashochati nakankshati samak sarveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim labate param. One who is thus transcendentally situated at once realizes the Supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. He never laments nor desires to have anything. He is equally disposed to every living entity. In that state, he attains pure devotional service unto me. The platform of knowledge is advantageous because it is a means by which one may come to the stage of devotional service. However, if one takes to devotional service directly, knowledge is revealed without separate endeavor. This is confirmed in Srimad-Bhagavatam 127. Vasudevi Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Priyojita Janajat Yashavayagyam Jnanam Chadanahaitukam. Devotional service automatically reveals actual knowledge of our material existence. One who is sufficiently intelligent immediately attains the stage of renunciation of so-called society, family, and love, as well as other things. As long as we are attached to society, family, and love of the material world, there is no question of knowledge. Nor is there a question of devotional service. By directly taking to devotional service, however, one becomes filled with knowledge and renunciation. In this way, one's life becomes successful. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 4th canto, 25th chapter of Srimad-Bhagavatam, entitled The Descriptions of the Characteristics of King Puranjana. It's like one act after another, and we're like heading we're heading home, actually. We're learning about the material world now, what it is. And the attachments that we have for one another are natural, because we're here in the material world, but all of those attachments are temporary. No matter how attached we are to woman, to wife, and family, and home, and friends, and family, and nation, and even philanthropy, and helping others, and all these things, it evaporates. Over time, it evaporates. And we don't really know. Therefore, none of those things can satisfy us completely, because we're spiritual beings, eternal spiritual beings. And we're looking for relationships that are eternal. Therefore, this picture that is being painted in this allegorical story about the material world is painting a reality picture, so that we can see it more for what it is and want to go to the original prototype of the reflection. Every reflection has an original form that's causing the reflection. So in the spiritual world, there's a prototype of what's going on here. Only the forms there are not temporary, they're eternal. The relationships are eternal. So everything we're looking for here, we're actually looking in the wrong place. There's a story that our spiritual master once told, that a man lost his keys to his car, and he really had an important appointment. So he was down on the ground searching frantically, looking for his keys, and his friend walks along, and he says, "What's going on?" He says, "I lost my car keys, and I got to go to this appointment, otherwise my life's finished." He said, "Well, do you remember the last place you were when you lost them?" And he said, "About 500 yards down that way." So why are you looking here? "Well, there's no light post down there. There's a light post here, so I'm looking here." Not that he's looking for the right thing, but he's looking in the wrong place. Right. So that's what we're doing in this material world. Chapter 26. King Puranjana goes to the forest to hunt, and his queen becomes angry. Text 1-3. the great sage Narada said, "My dear king, once upon a time, King Puranjana took his great bow and equipped with golden armor and a quiver of unlimited arrows, and accompanied by 11 commanders, he sat on his chariot, driven by 5 swift horses, and went to the forest named Panchaprastha. He took with him in that chariot 2 explosive arrows. The chariot itself was situated on 2 wheels and 1 revolving axle. On the chariot were 3 flags, 1 rein, 1 chariot driver, 1 sitting place, 2 poles to which the harness was fixed, 5 weapons, and 7 coverings. The chariot moved in 5 different styles, and 5 obstacles lay before it. All the decorations of the chariot were made of gold. Purport. These 3 verses explain how the material body of the living entity is under the control of the 3 qualities of the external energy. The body itself is the chariot. Just letting it sink in. The body itself is the chariot. And the living entity is the owner of the body, as explained in Bhagavad Gita 2:13. Dehi no smin yata dehe komanam. The owner of the body is called the Dehi, and he is situated within this body, specifically within the heart. The living entity is driven by 1 chariot driver. The chariot itself is made of 3 gunas, 3 qualities of material nature, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 1861, Yantra Rudani Mayaya. The word yantra means carriage. The body is given by material nature, and the driver of that body is Paramatma, the Supersoul. The living entity is seated within the chariot. This is the actual position. The living entity is always being influenced by the 3 qualities, sattva, goodness, rajas, passion, and tamas, ignorance. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 7:13. Tribir gunamayar bhavai. The living entity is bewildered by the 3 qualities of material nature. These 3 qualities are described in this verse as 3 flags. By a flag, one can come to know who the owner of the chariot is. Similarly, by the influence of the 3 qualities of material nature, one can easily know the direction in which the chariot is moving. In other words, one who has eyes to see can understand how the body is being driven, influenced by the particular type of quality of material nature. In these 3 verses, the activity of the living entity is described to prove how the body becomes influenced by the quality of ignorance, even when a person wants to be religious. Narada Muni wanted to prove to King Prachinabarishad that the king was being influenced by the tamoguna, the quality of ignorance, even though the king was supposed to be very religious. According to Karma Kandiya, the process of fruitive activities, a person performs various sacrifices directed by the Vedas. And in those sacrifices, animal killing or experimenting on the life of animals to test the power of Vedic mantras is enjoined. Animal killing is certainly conducted under the influence of the mode of passion. Even though one may be religiously inclined, animal sacrifice is recommended in the Shastras, not only in the Vedas, but even in the modern scriptures of other sects. These animal sacrifices are recommended in the name of religion, but actually, animal sacrifice is meant for persons in the mode of ignorance. when such people kill animals, they can at least do so in the name of religion. However, when the religious system is transcendental, like the Vaishnava religion, there is no place for animal sacrifice. Such a transcendental religious system is recommended by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita 1866. Sarvadharman Purityaja Mamekam Sharanam Brajat Aham Tvam Sarvapapebhyo Moksha Yishami Ma Shujaha. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reaction. Do not fear. Because King Prachinabarishat was engaged in performing various sacrifices in which animals were killed, Narada Muni pointed out that such sacrifices are influenced by the mode of ignorance. From the very beginning of Srimad-Bhagavatam 112, it is said, Prochita Kaitavo Tra. All kinds of religious systems that are involved in cheating are completely kicked out of the Srimad-Bhagavatam. In the Bhagavad Dharma, the religion dealing with one's relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, animal sacrifice is not recommended. In the performance of Sankirtan Yajna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. There is no recommendation for animal sacrifices. In these 3 verses, King Puranjana's going to the forest to kill animals is symbolic of the living entities being driven by the mode of ignorance and thus engaging in different activities for sense gratification. The material body itself indicates that the living entity is always influenced by the 3 modes of material nature and that he is driven to enjoy material resources. When the body is influenced by the mode of ignorance, its infection becomes very acute. When it is influenced by the mode of passion, the infection is at the symptomatic stage. However, when the body is influenced by the mode of goodness, the materialistic infection becomes purified. The ritualistic ceremonies recommended in religious systems are certainly on the platform of goodness. But because within this material world, even the mode of goodness is sometimes polluted by the other qualities, namely passion and ignorance, a man in goodness is sometimes driven by the influence of ignorance. It is herein described that King Puranjana once went to the forest to kill animals. This means that he, the living entity, came under the influence of the mode of ignorance. The forest in which King Puranjana engaged in hunting was named Pancha Prastha. The word Pancha means 5, and this indicates the objects of the 5 senses. The body has 5 working senses, namely the hands, the legs, the tongue, the rectum, and the genitals. By taking full advantage of these working senses, the body enjoys material life. The chariot is driven by 5 horses, which represent the 5 sense organs, namely the eyes, ears, nose, skin, and tongue. These sense organs are very easily attracted by the sense objects. Consequently, the horses are directed as moving swiftly. On the chariot, King Puranjana kept 2 explosive weapons, which may be compared to ahankara, or false ego. This false ego is typified by 2 attitudes. I am this body, ahanta, and everything in my bodily relationships belongs to me, mamata. The 2 wheels of the chariot may be compared to the 2 moving facilities, namely sinful life and religious life. The chariot is decorated with 3 flags, which represent the 3 modes of material nature. The 5 kinds of obstacles, or uneven roads, represent the 5 kinds of air passing within the body. These are prana, apana, udana, samana, and vyana. The body itself is covered by 7 coverings, namely skin, muscle, fat, blood, marrow, bone, and semen. The living entity is covered by these subtle material elements and 5 gross elements. These are actually obstacles placed before the living entity on the path of liberation from material bondage. The word rashmi, rope, in this verse indicates the mind. The word nidha is also significant, for nidha indicates the nest where a bird takes rest. In this case, nidha is the heart, where the living entity is situated. The living entity sits in one place only. The causes of his bondage are two, namely lamentation and illusion. In material existence, the living entity simply hankers to get something he can never get. Therefore, he is an illusion. As a result of being in this illusory situation, the living entity is always lamenting. Thus, lamentation and illusion are described herein as dvi kubara, the two posts of bondage. The living entity carries out different desires through 5 different processes, which indicate the working of the 5 working senses. The golden ornaments and dress indicate that the living entity is influenced by the quality of rajaguna, passion. One who has a good deal of money or riches is especially driven by the mode of passion. Being influenced by the mode of passion, one desires so many things for enjoyment in this material world. The 11 commanders represent the 10 senses and the mind. The mind is always making plans with the 10 commanders to enjoy the material world. The forest named Panchaprastha, wherein the king went to hunt, is the forest of the 5 sense objects: form, taste, sound, smell, and touch. Thus, in these 3 verses, Narada Muni describes the position of the material body and the engagement of the living entity within it. Text 4. Pictures worth 1,000 words, and poetic words are worth a lot more than that. Text 4. It was almost impossible for King Puranjana to give up the company of his queen, even for a moment. Nonetheless, on that day, being very much inspired by the desire to hunt, he took up his bow and arrow with great pride and went into the forest, not caring for his wife. Purport. One form of hunting is known as woman hunting. A conditioned soul. You got one? A conditioned soul is never satisfied with one wife. Those whose senses are very much uncontrolled especially try to hunt for many women. King Puranjana is abandoning the companies of his religiously married wife, is representative of the conditioned soul's attempt to hunt for many women for sense gratification. Wherever a king goes, he is supposed to be accompanied by his queen. But when the king, or conditioned soul, becomes greatly overpowered by the desire for sense gratification, he does not care for religious principles. Instead, with great pride, he accepts the bow and arrow of attachment and hatred. Whoa. Our consciousness is always working in 2 ways, the right way and the wrong way. When one becomes too proud of his position, influenced by the mode of passion, he gives up the right path and accepts the wrong one. Kshatriya kings are sometimes advised to go to the forest to hunt ferocious animals just to learn how to kill. But such forays are never meant for sense gratification. Killing animals to eat their flesh is forbidden for human beings. And we'll stop there for today, the reading. And now we have what is called open mic. So open mic means you want to know something more, or something that you read or heard stuck in your mind and you want to discuss more about it, or you want to reflect yourself about something like the rest of us. Here it is. Yena.
I do. Since I'm new, I'm sure I'll likely have a lot of questions, but I'll try to be succinct. On page 448, when it talks about illicit sex and sex life or sex, and it talks about one must give up the company of women. What about men?
Same.
So it means the same, men and women. Okay.
Yeah. But it talks about this for a reason. And that is that the form of the human body, the woman's form, is all the attractive features of the rolled up into one thing. That's the human female form. It's got all the attractive features of all the material, all rolled up into one.
So it's good and bad.
Yeah. And the male's form is the same. The male form is attracted to the female. Now, in this age that we're living in now, which is very prominently in ignorance, the subtle body, which has been going back and forth between male and female bodies for a long time, confirmed. We call that the conch shell of Maya, calling us to go and do something else than what we're doing, which is having a good time hearing about the truth, looking for the truth. So, the material nature, there are laws of nature, you know, and you can't break the laws of nature. If you learn what the laws of nature are and then follow them, then you live as a free citizen. Mm-hmm. But if you break the laws of the government, or the laws of nature in this case, then you become put in prison, or some kind of or some kind of punishment, some kind of, rectification or something like that. So, see, the thing is, we're in the material world, and we're thinking that this is all there is. And therefore, when we hear how we get attracted to it, and how we fall down, and how we get all confused, I was just about to say before the conch shell of Maya blew and distracted me, which is her business, his business. The soul is carried by the subtle body from one body to another in search of happiness. Because the nature of the soul is to be happy. The nature of the soul is to be eternal, is not to die, because the soul is eternal. And the nature of the soul is to want to know everything, because in the spiritual world we're full of knowledge. But in the material world, we're busily working hard to stay looking young, so there's like a $1 trillion industry of, cosmetics, which are mainly used by women, but they're also used now by men, but in general, usually for women. And because the soul has been going from male body and then becoming attached to the female body and then taking body of the woman and getting attached to the male body and getting a male body, and like this going back and forth, the subtle body, which is there all along this journey in the material world, becomes confused. And sometimes it's in a male body, but it's thinking that it's female, or it's in a female body and it's thinking it's male. And that's why all this whole, what's this called? Transgen is happening now in the world. It's because of this. So this is knowledge. This is real knowledge, spiritual knowledge of how the laws of nature are working and why they're working the way they are and what's happening as a result and what we're supposed to do to actually come out of it and see our real spiritual identity, which has nothing to do with the material body and the material sense objects and all these things. The real identity of the soul is Satchidananda. It's eternity, knowledge, and bliss. And in the spiritual world where we came from, there are forms and relationships and activities and varieties and everything that goes on here, only without the suffering, without the old age, without the birth, without the death, without the disease. But because we're thinking this is all there is, we're just being forced by the laws of nature to accept it. Okay, death is part of life, so I'll just suffer as I get closer. I'll suffer more. And when I get closer and closer, I'll suffer more and more. And then finally, my relatives will surround me and they'll go, oh, poor you. And then you have to go. Doesn't make a difference how much money you got. Doesn't make a difference what you think. Doesn't make a difference what plans you've made. No, hold on. Just give me 5 more minutes. I have to. No. When that moment's up, you're gone. That's reality. So it's not escapism to learn the truth, to learn, to find out, to inquire, to assess things, to confront what's going on, according to knowledge, not according to one's own speculation, because this is too much for us to speculate about and figure out ourselves. It's too much. Well, who are we? One little tiny speck in the universe that we can't even know. We don't even know how big it is. I mean, the Vedas tell us how big it is. The Vedas tell us how many species of life there are for us to try to enjoy in. It tells us everything. It tells us all about the cycles of time. It tells us about the extent of time of this cosmic body, just like this body. It comes into being, it grows, it enjoys, it dwindles, and it dies. Everybody. Never has there been a material body that has gone on forever. Never. And there never will be, no matter what the scientists tell us. Just give us enough money, and don't worry. A few lifetimes, and you'll be able to live forever in this body. I want to live forever in this body. No thanks. So that's the deal. That's the deal. And the thing that keeps us identifying with the material body is sex. Whether you're in a human body, or an insect body, or a snake body, or a frog body, or a peacock's body, or a swan's body, or an elephant's body, you name it, you pick it. And that's how you get attracted to that material body, and that's how you get attracted to material existence. Therefore, to become free from illicit sex is the first step to become free from the knot of material existence and be able to hear. There's 2 statements in the Bible that were very, very relevant to this. One is, let those who have ears hear. And the other is, one must become as a little child to enter the kingdom of God. To become like a little child means you don't have sex desire when you're a little child. Little child. Only when you get puberty, then it all starts, the chaos. So that's the reality. We're looking for a way back to our original home, to go back home, back to Godhead, to the spiritual world, where there's no death, there's no disease, no old age, no birth. These are the basic problems of material existence. And they're not solvable with material power, with material strength. They're not solvable. The only solvable thing is to go back to the spiritual world. Or within the body to become spiritually realized is the same. And there's a process for doing that. And for each age there's a different process that's recommended. For this age that we're living in now, the process recommended is to hear the holy name of Krishna and this Srimad-Bhagavatam, which is specifically intended to educate us spiritually, so we'll know what to think, what not to think, what to do, what not to do, in order not to act in a way that will entangle us further in material existence. We got a question? We also have cyberspace. This is being broadcast, and there's about 1,350 followers. But they're not all online, live. They're all over the world. Hare Krishna. Who is it?
Arindama says, Hare Krishna, dear Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. We read about how the living entity is directed in the material world as the material body as the chariot. At what point in devotional service does the Supreme Lord direct the chariot in the right direction? Yours in service, Arindama.
As soon as you surrender to Krishna. If someone is your director and you're always doing other than what he wants you to do or she wants you to do, then your life is confused and frustrated and whatever. You don't get proper direction. So when you surrender to the super soul in the heart and the instructions of the super soul through the scriptures, through the spiritual master, and through the devotees who are actually following strictly and who are advanced in spiritual consciousness and who know the science, then you get direction. You get direction from outside through the Bhagavad Gita, through the Bhagavatam, through your spiritual master, through the practicing devotees who are advanced, and through the super soul in the heart who confirms it. So there's a system of checks and balances. It's not that we can just think something's true and that makes it true. We have to check our thesis, our hypothesis, with spiritual authority. And that spiritual authority is Shastra, Guru, and Sadhu. So when you yourself, just like if you went looking for gold, but you didn't know anything about gold, you heard it was valuable, you heard it's really valuable, and you went looking for it, but you didn't know anything about it, what color it was, how much it weighed, the qualities of gold. Somebody will, sell you a box of cornflakes and charge you $20,000, and you'll be, cheated. So we have to find out. We're human beings. Part of the responsibility of human life is to find out, is to search, to inquire. Therefore, the first aphorism of the Veda is Atato Brahma Jigyasa. So Atato means now. The word Atato in Sanskrit means now. Brahma means the absolute truth, and Jigyasa means inquire. So Atato Brahma Jigyasa means now is the time to inquire about the absolute truth. And what it now means? Now that you have a human form. Because the dogs and cats can't read it and inquire. Not possible. But the human being can. Therefore the Veda says, Atato, now, Brahma Jigyasa. You can read it, you're hearing it, you're reading it. Now it's time to search for the absolute truth. So when you begin to inquire, and when you learn enough that you know what to inquire and who to inquire from, then you get direction. And when you submit to the direction, when you actually agree to accept the direction, it's like you're in a university class and you're always looking out the window and you're doodling and you're thinking about what you're going to do tonight and this and that, and then you wonder why when the test comes you can't get the grade, and then you flunk. So there's this airy-fairy idea of what spiritual life is, and it's something that just happens. It's intuitive. And I don't need to read any books. I don't need to follow any print. I just, by osmosis, somehow or other I get it. But it's not like that. It's spiritual knowledge is like any other knowledge. It requires study, and it requires hard work, and it requires, direction, and it requires practice. It requires everything that you do anything else about. But the difference is, in this science or this topic, subject matter, the goal is very exalted. The goal is spiritual. It's beyond the modes of nature. It's beyond the laws of nature. It's transcendental. This is what transcendence means. To transcend the modes of material nature. To transcend birth and death and old age and disease. To know what to do at the time of death. So we're practicing now. This is what sadhana means, to practice with our senses, with our present senses and our present mind and our present consciousness. We're practicing how to learn how to think about God. And the more we know about God, the more our love for God, which is there already in the heart. Love for God is there in the heart of every living being in this world. Even if you're a germ, you've got love of God in the heart. It's just covered completely. There's no, it talks about holes. We got eyes and ears and nose and the other parts of the body. That's how the consciousness vents with the material world. And we take in and we have experiences. We take in knowledge. We act through these senses and the holes in the body. But if you're a germ, you don't get any, consciousness doesn't get a chance to come out. But every living being, whether it's a tree or a germ or an elephant, like an eagle or a human being or whatever, the soul is there, activating the body. And the whole cosmic body is being activated by the Supreme Soul, who is in every atom of the universe and in the heart of every living being, and sanctioning and directing. And our duty is to purify our body and our mind so that we can hear. So that we can hear that conscience. Sometimes we hear it. No, better not do that. Anyway, nobody's looking. Yeah, I'll do it anyway. And then what happens? There's a reaction. Somebody comes up, I saw him do that. It's in the papers, it's in the internet, and all of a sudden you're in trouble. And you're trying to dig your way out of whatever you got yourself into. Welcome home. We got some things going on here now. We're churning.
This is very relevant to kind of where I'm at. I've been struggling with, like, I've got all these books of probably every religion in the world on my bookshelf, and they're just collecting dust, and I've been reading them, and I'm like, what am I going to do with these books? I'm digging, as we were talking about it, I'm digging all these holes in the ground, and I'm not going deep enough to hit the water, so it's like, and then this is abandon all variety. This is like confirmation to me. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender to me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reaction. Do not fear.
Yeah. Shall I translate English for you? Donate your books to a library, except for Prabhupada's books, and get into it.
Yeah.
You're already into it. You've been. See, here's the thing. Where's this Gita? Gita. There it is. Bring it over here. Here's the process. In a nutshell, by Krishna. It's just a nutshell. There's a lot more to it, but just learn. The verses are very enlightening. Krishna starts at the top, at the end. Just fix your mind upon me. What does the Bible say? Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy strength and all thy mind. That sounds familiar. Just fix your mind upon me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and engage all your intelligence in me. Thus you will live in me always, without a doubt. If, however, my dear Puranjana, O winner of wealth, if you cannot fix your mind upon me without deviation, then follow the regulative principles of Bhakti Yoga. In this way, develop a desire to attain me. If you cannot practice the regulations of Bhakti Yoga, then just try to work for me. Because by working for me, you will come to the perfect stage. If, however, you are unable to work in this consciousness of me, then try to act giving up all the results of your work and try to be self-situated. That means national, hospital, philanthropic, giving up, giving up the fruits. And then, the end. If you cannot take to this practice, then engage yourself in the cultivation of knowledge. That's what all the books are about. Better than knowledge, however, is meditation. In this sense, it means the contemplation of that knowledge, which will take you higher and higher until you come to Krishna consciousness, or the Vedic knowledge, the Vedic principles. And better than meditation is renunciation of the fruits of action, because by such renunciation one can attain peace of mind. And that goes right back to this giving up all the results of your work and try to be self-situated, work for me, follow the regulated principles of Bhakti Yoga, think of me always, and go back to Godhead. That's the cycle. So you searched, you cultivated knowledge, and it took you because you're sincere, and you had a couple of hiccups along the way, and you responded properly. And then when you came here and you started to hear, this was how many months ago? It's quite a ways ago now. Almost a year. Almost a year. And now every time you speak, believe it or not, we all listen up. Every time you speak. Because it's very clear, it's very simple, and you're absorbing it, and you're not fooling around. Well, at least not as much as you were.
Less. That realization might even help somebody in cyber somewhere,
Absolutely.
Somewhere.
Absolutely.
But that's been a struggle for me because I'm so attached. I was so attached to those books.
Take your initiation.
Yeah.
Take your initiation. Follow the regular principles. Keep reading these books, and we'll go back to Godhead together.
Right.
There you go. There you go. That's it. End of story. Beginning of story.
Beginning of story.
Beginning of story. That's it. This is how it works. Anybody. There's no holds barred. With that, I'm going to stop. No, I'm going to stop now because of the program going over the temple and want our new guests to go and be there with the babies and kirtan and have some festival type of activity. It's so nice to see you. Thank you very much, Michelle, for coming to here. Thank you, Yanya. Thank you for coming to visit. Thank you for coming to visit. And here, we welcome you. We do this every night. On weekends, it's 4:30. Monday through Friday at 6:30. That's my commitment to everyone. That's what I do. Hare Krishna. Thank you, all of you out in cyberspace. We'll see you tomorrow at 6:30 Central Time in America for more of the same. Hare Krishna. Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol.